Greetings from Dallas and the end of day one at SEC Football Media Day. I'm Jenny Carlson back here at the hotel after a busy first day. Lots still going on as far as radio interviews and some TV stuff. I couldn't find a quiet spot. So for today, I came back here to the hotel to give you my thoughts about the first day. Before we get to that, I want to say a quick thanks to my sponsors, that being Fowler Automotive and Scott Petit at Trademark Exteriors Renovation. Both of them fantastic helpers for me. I just can't thank them enough. FowlerAuto.com. If you're in the market for a new car, give them a look. They've got all sorts of different makes and models, and they are here to help you with that next car. And if you're looking for any renovations on the outside of your house, Scott's the guy to reach out to. You can text or call him at 405-627-6296. He'll send someone over and they'll get you some numbers, and then they'll do a great job on those renovations. So again, big thanks to Fowler Auto and Scott Petit at Trademark. All right, so day one is in the books. Day one of 4 with 16 teams, 4 teams each day. Today it was LSU, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Vanderbilt. Got to see former OU assistant Shane Beamer, now the head coach at South Carolina. Also heard from Lane Kiffin, who is widely regarded as one of the more entertaining coaches in college football, but he's only a few days removed from the death of his father, Monty. So definitely a subdued Lane Kiffin. But the headliner of the day was really Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, who launched the proceedings with his State of the Conference comments to start the day and then held a press conference. Of course, lots of talk about Oklahoma and Texas. We wondered if OU and Texas, being the newcomers to the league, would really dominate a lot of the conversation, and at least in the main media room where the interviews that are broadcast on SEC Network are held, where if you're watching at home, you've probably seen those interviews. There was a lot of OU and Texas talk. I didn't know how much there would be from either OU and Texas media or even media outside that, but I definitely think that you could say if there was a headliner, that was probably it in day one, is just talk about the Sooners and Longhorns coming on board. I do think Monty Kiffin's death and Lane Kiffin's appearance at Media Day, which I don't know that I thought he would be here. I wasn't sure what the situation would be. Monty Kiffin, longtime football coach who Lane grew up sort of learning under, being mentored by, died just last Thursday. So I didn't know what Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin would do. But Lane Kiffin said, one of his dad's golden rules when it came to coaching football, but ask of his players and all of his coaches, show up. That was sort of the first thing. You got to show up, do your job to get better, to get developed. And Lane Kiffin basically said, today I'm showing up. And there was no doubt that he was affected by what was happening. But again, with that talk of OU and Texas, there was also talk about what might come next for the SEC. Obviously, this is sort of the first public event, aside from those on-campus events at Texas and Oklahoma, with the SEC as a 16-team conference. But with the ongoing situation in the ACC and Clemson and Florida State at the head of that, as trying to either push the ACC to something different or to break out of the ACC, Greg Sankey asked about that in a variety of ways. He basically kept saying that he was focused on the 16. He was comfortable with the 16, but there was definitely no sort of shutdown of the fact that there might come a day when the SEC does look to add. Now, he did say, I thought it was pretty interesting, one of his comments in his State of the Conference comments or speech was that, in all of the conference expansion, the Southeastern Conference was really the only conference that maintained a name that meant anything, because while they did add Oklahoma and Texas, they really didn't add much outside or anything outside of what you could consider that SEC footprint. So they really feel like geographically they still hit the southeastern part of the country. But remember, if Clemson and Florida State become available, they would also fit in that footprint. So, and that's not to say that there aren't other ACC teams that could potentially be scooped up if the ACC does dissolve. There are maybe not as many in the high profile range of those two for football, but you've definitely got some other interesting options that might enhance what the SEC has. So talk about that. And again, him not sort of shutting that down entirely. He said that there's 16 teams today and tomorrow, but what about after that? What about next week? What about next month? What about next year? Which if you're looking at another 6 months away, that could be a whole new round of conference realignment. So I think that was definitely interesting to hear that, but also some other stuff that stood out to me about what Sankey had to say. He really seemed to push back against outside interests coming into college football, those private equity funds, corporate dollars in ways that we haven't seen them before. He pushed back against that, but he also said college football needs Congress. College athletics needs Congress to do some things, which to me is not college football centric when you talk about the U.S. Congress, because if they start making rules, you might say, well, we need regulation, but then the regulation you get might not be something you like. So kind of an interesting dichotomy there by Greg Sankey. But for Sooner fans, I think one of the more interesting things he had to say was directed towards a question about Texas. A good friend of mine, Kirk Bowles, who's covered Texas continuously since 1976, asked Sankey about Texas specifically, the fact that Texas liked to think it ran the Big 12. And frankly, my feeling is that, OU was basically locked arms and lockstep with Texas in a lot of the way that the Big 12 was run. But then Kirk asked the question, what's Sankey's expectation for how Texas will be perceived, how they will, whether their leadership will continue on the field and in the boardroom. And basically Sankey gave, I think, one of his shortest answers of the entire day, and basically said, listen, they're in a conference of their peers and they'll fit, but he didn't say anything about them standing out. And I think that's very much the reality now for Oklahoma and Texas. They've traded that influence that they had in the Big 12, where they were the premier brands who they did get to pull a lot more weight than 1-to-1 compared to some of the other schools. But now it's going to be a lot harder, in fact, probably impossible for them to be as influential in the SEC as they were in the Big 12. But the trade-off is more stability in an era of college athletics that is really in a lot of upheaval right now, more money at a time when that's become increasingly important. So you could also argue that the sway that they now have as a member of the SEC is bigger than the sway that they had as a member of the Big 12. So the trade-offs should help to make Sooners and Longhorns everywhere feel better about losing some of that sway that they had in the Big 12. But it was just an interesting sort of welcome to the SEC moment, Sooners and Longhorns. This is the reality. This is the new situation. There was talk about football too, but a lot of really off-field stuff that seemed to dominate the day. Tuesday, there may be a lot more football coming at you because the Sooners are on the docket. They will talk on Tuesday afternoon. If you want to watch that on one of the ESPN networks, I believe 12:50 is Brent Venables' time in the main media room where he'll be on stage. The coaches have about 30 minutes, and all of them have started with a fairly lengthy opening statement. Shane Beamer, the South Carolina coach, spoke for 17 minutes. He has been known to be the longest winded the last couple of years. Brent Venables has been known to give some long opening statements, so we'll have to see how he clocks in. But definitely lots of Sooner talk coming on Tuesday. I'll be there for you. I'll have lots more coverage at Beyond the Box Score, jennycarlson.substack.com, or here on my YouTube channel. Please subscribe both places. You can do so for free at both on YouTube and on the Substack site. But if you want to support my work, you can do that on the Substack site. Again, thanks to my sponsors, Fowler and Scott Petit at Trademark. Have a lot more from Dallas, but that's all the time I've got right now. See you next time.